Okay, we're recording. Okay, so we're in chapter 1, and actually we have to finish this by tomorrow, so we don't have a whole lot of time to cover chapter 1. But the cool thing about it is it's just kind of an overview of what you have in this book, and so that's a whole bunch of information, but we don't have to go into a lot of detail to cover that information. So that should help us. So let's move from that. All right. Okay. So here is these are characteristics of anything that's living. Obviously, life is very ordered. Atoms that are built into molecules. From there, we build molecules into cells, and then there's all kinds of organization within a cell, and then we have cells organized into tissues, and then tissues organized into organs, like a stomach or whatever, an eyeball, that's an organ. And then you have systems like the digestive system, the respiratory system, the immune system, the digestive system. We can go on and on with that. There are only 11 of them. And so there's a tremendous amount of organization. And so anything living, there's a tremendous amount of organization to that. And then even if you're looking at the simplest of all organisms on the planet, that would be a bacterium. Doesn't get more simple than that, bacterium. There is a tremendous amount of organization to that, and we will get there. And interestingly enough, in this course, we only go from atom to molecule to cell. That's about it. Well, we have to learn how cells produce energy and how plants make sugar, But then at the end of it, we do a little bit of genetics. But that's it. We're, atoms, molecules, cells, a little bit of genetics. Ta-da, you've done a whole semester. You're like, well, this ought to be easy. We got a lot of stuff to cover. Just to do that. Just to do that part. Anyway. Okay, reproduction. Obviously, there would be none of us here if that weren't happening. Some of you may have children. I'm just always curious. You don't have to answer this if you don't. It's absolutely not any of my business. How many of you have children? 1, 2, 3. That's great. Children are great. As long as you can slap them around a little bit. I'm just kidding. No, I think children are super. All right. So, however, you do not have to reproduce to be alive. Not necessary. You don't have to reproduce to be alive, but obviously the species has to continue, and without that, that would not happen. Okay, growth, development, certainly that does happen. Even the smallest and simplest, which would be the bacteria of organisms on the planet, there is some growth there and some development. You have to develop certain things within that cell. Many of them produce different products, so certainly growth and development. Energy processing, that's huge. We take food in, and then it passes through the digestive system, and then what doesn't get absorbed passes out. And what is done with that food, tremendous amount of energy processing, so much. We have to be able to produce energy. We need to be able to walk up those 3 flights of stairs in order to get up here to the 3rd floor. Is that 3 flights or just 2? Anyway, it hurts. hurts me to do that, and it doesn't hurt, but I'm pretty well winded by the time I do it. But I do it. I don't take elevator. It's like stairs every time. But energy processing, we have to have the energy in order to write on paper. You got to have energy to do anything you're going to do. Thinking requires energy. You can get to the point where you're brain dead. You can study, and to the point where your brain has stopped. You need to maybe study for 1 hour and then take an hour break. Then study maybe for an hour. Then take an hour break. Give yourself some time to have some fun in there. Don't just hit it and just stay with it for hour after hour. That is not going to work for you. It never does work. You're not going to learn. You may be able to memorize enough to get through a test. But the way this is going to work, this is going to build on itself. Like I said, we talk about atoms, and then we go to molecules, and that builds, and then we go to cells, and that builds, and so forth. So if you don't really understand the atoms and so forth, you're not really going to understand the molecules. If you don't understand that, you have no way to understand the cell because they're made out of molecules. You have to understand how things get in cells, how things get out of cells, what happens within the cell, how energy is produced, how sugar is produced by the plant. All of those processes which involve molecules, which involve atoms, and it all builds. And so if you don't have that foundation and you go in to take an MCAT or a PCAT, MCAT to get into med school, PCAT to get into pharmaceutical school, whichever school you're trying to get into, you're going to take an entrance exam. And if you don't do really well on that, then you're not getting in. And so this foundation is so amazingly important. And I will do everything I can to provide that. I promise you I will. You just need to hang with me. And if you don't get something, again, get some help. Get that cleared up. All right. So energy processing, regulation. Here you have thermoregulation. They're showing a lizard out sunning himself. This weekend, past weekend, I was in Alpine, Texas. I actually have a home in Alpine, Texas, and I go there almost every weekend. In fact, I tell people that someone in my family or someone else's family is going to have to die, pass away, before I will miss a weekend in Alpine, because I do love it that much. Anyway, and there's a road to this housing development area, and I think it's probably a retirement place. And if not, it's I look at it as an investment. It's like I don't save money in the bank. I throw it into properties. People do different things, and I've always done properties. Buy a house, remodel it, sell it. Buy a house, remodel it, sell it. I built a house pretty much from scratch, finished it out, sold it. Anyway, so this is what I do. And if I don't retire in that house, then I'll sell what I have here, and then sell what I have there, and then pull the funds, and then probably move to Santa Fe and buy something there. I don't know. I look at different things all the time, but I like moving properties around and doing that kind of deal. For me, it's just kind of fun. But I was going out. It's kind of a windy road. Anyway, going up it's kind of on a hill. They call it a hill. You might call it a mountain. I mean, from West Texas, this is pretty flat. I don't know if you noticed. It's flat around here. But so we call those mountains. Anyway, so I'm winding the way out, and there was this rattlesnake right in the middle of the road, just sunning himself, having the best time. And of course, I'm for killing those rattlesnakes. I'm not big on killing anything, I will tell you, at all. I saw the Dalai Lama one time give a speech in Central, in New York City at the Park, Central Park. Yeah, Central Park. Anyway, and one of his things that he talked about was you never kill anything ever. And so I pretty much don't kill anything, unless you're going to eat it. And I wasn't going to eat that rattlesnake, but I don't like those rattlesnakes. I could step outside and just step right on one, step out the back door and just step right on one. So I don't want them around. So I do kill those. So I was just like, boom, 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 right over him. So he kind of crawled off and I'm sure died out in the bushes. But that's what he was doing, sunning himself to regulate his heat, to get his temperature up. They are cold-blooded animals, so they're animals that they get their heat from the environment. And whatever temperature the environment is, that's what it is. If I'm going to do any work I've got not much land. It's only an acre and a half. But anyway, in the what I call the back 40, which is a joke. But if I'm gonna do any weed eating or anything back there, I wait till winter, till they're all some They're in a hole. I'm not going to step on a rattlesnake. I wait till winter to go out there and do that kind of stuff. But this time of year, you know, it's getting a little cooler, so they crawl out in the middle of that black tar and warm themselves up, and then they can move about during the day. And that's what they do first thing in the morning many times. So you get to run over a lot of rattlesnakes. It's just probably horrible. I'm sorry, Dalai Lama. I'm killing your snakes. But regulation, obviously. Response to the environment. We all respond to the environment, and then evolutionary adaptation. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, wait, hold on. No, I don't believe in evolution whatsoever. You know, let me give you an example of evolution. You can perform evolution in your own front yard. You can do it. I'll tell you how. You can, and I did this myself. You can, like one year, I had this lawn. It was in Odessa, and I would sold the house, of course, eventually. But I'd bend down and I'd pull a weed, and I'd bend down and I'd pull a weed, and I'd bend down and pull a weed, but it would break off at the base, and the root would stay in there. And then I'd bend down, pull a weed, bend down, pull a weed, bend down, pull a weed, you know. And the one where the roots stayed in the ground, you know, maybe I didn't get out there for another 2 weeks. 2 months, probably take that long, in order to pull weeds again. And this time I'd bend down and pull a weed, it'd break off at the base. I'd bend down and pull a weed, it'd break off at the base. I'd bend down and pull a weed, it'd break off at the base. So what had happened, the one, and it's pretty obvious, that the root stayed in the ground, it developed leaves, and it put on a flower, and the flowers develop into the fruit structures, and the fruit structures are what get dispersed, which have the seed in them. So the seeds then spread across that lawn, and then, of course, they took hold and they grew. So now all of a sudden, all the weeds I'm trying to pull of that particular category would break off at the base. Okay, so for some reason, I had one plant that had a gene structure in its DNA. It had a gene structure would allow it to break off at the base. Call it a mutation. Call it just something weird. You know, it wasn't normal because most of them you could pull. But that was a little different. It was a variability is what it was. And it broke off at the base. Now they all broke off at the base, which means they all had that same gene structure. That's all evolution is. Evolution is a change in gene structure over time. That's all it is. You change the gene structure over time, and you get an evolution. So I did it myself. I've created evolution. I was the force that created it. You know, if you have a group of, let's say, beetles that are very dark, and you have some of the same species that are very light, which ones do you think the birds are going to eat first? The ones, obviously, they can see more readily. That's going to be, you know, wherever they've landed, say like on a tree, the lighter ones will stand out. The darker ones would blend in. So obviously, it's going to be the lighter ones that are picked off. And then you have changed the gene structure over time very quickly. That's an evolution. So, you know, these people that go, oh, evolution, that's just a theory. It is no longer even a theory. It's no longer called theory of evolution. It's called the principle of evolution. That's considered to be a scientific law, a fact at this point in time. So we you know, in biology you use principle. In physics or chemistry, they use what is called a law, like Boyle's law, or there's several laws, but law of gravity, for example. But it's a principle of evolution. It's like it can no longer be refuted. It's just too much scientific evidence to even begin to think that is not true. And some people are still like, you know, and they don't know that. They've never been taught that. You know, they've always been taught, well, evolution is just, you know, it's just an idea out there floating around. No, it is no longer just an idea that's just floating around. So evolution, evolutionary adaptation, not hard to do it at all. Like I say, you can do it. You can create your own evolution. Not a problem. Okay, so like I said, you know, what we're doing, now we don't go this far in this class, but here you have an atom. This is building into a molecule, and that molecule, In this particular example, of course, is DNA, and we'll get into that. And then molecules are organized into a structure, in this particular example, an organelle. Now, the one that they're pointing to in this diagram is the nucleus of that nerve cell, but there are other organelles within that. It's kind of like having an organ in our body. We've got stomachs and pancreas and spleen, and the list goes on. But we have organs. Within a cell, they wouldn't call them that. They would call them organelles. And so those are made out of molecules, but so is the entire cell composed of molecules. So you have these organelles, and then you have the entire cell, which is organized into a tissue, in this case nervous tissue, which is then organized into an organ system. In this case, they're showing you part of that organ system, the brain, spinal cord anyway. It's called the central nervous system of that. I think it's an alligator. And then we have the entire organism, which is the American alligator. And then you have a population. Now, population would be all the members of the same species within a defined area. So this is a population. We have a population within this room. We're all Homo sapien. We're all human beings in this room. I'm just guessing. Some of you could be from other planets, and we haven't yet to pick up on that. But I'm just guessing, probably, most likely, all human beings right here. So we're in a defined area. That's going to be a population. We could have the population of Woods Hall. I just call this building Woods Hall. Instead of math and science, whatever they call it, it's easier, Woods Hall. That'd be the population of this building. And then you could have the population of the campus, all the people on the campus. You can have a population of Odessa, Texas. You drive into Odessa, and what's it tell us at the city limit? How many thousands of people we have living here? I thought it said 94, but you could be right. You could be right. But I think it's more like 194,000. Yesterday, I went to Albertsons to pick up my blood pressure medication, and almost had 2 accidents, none of which would have been my fault had that happened. But just going to Albertsons, the distance was not that far. Almost had 2 accidents. I'm like, are you kidding me? Goodness. And these people on motorcycles, I'm like, what? You're going to ride a motorcycle in Odessa, Texas? Are you nuts? Wrap yourself up in some metal. Goodness, these people are crazy drivers. I don't know where they got their license, or if they even have a license, or, what? Maybe they're the ones from outer space. Well, I'm used to driving a spaceship, but hey. I don't know what this button does. Let's see if we can fly over all these people. Well, heck, I can't. I just run into that one. Can't fly. Stupid machine. I don't know. Anyway, population. And then you can have a community. Okay, like there are different kinds of communities. Anyway, you've got a defined area, and the community involves all the species within that defined area. So that would be all of, in this community, we do have a community in this room. You do have creatures that live in your hair. You do have creatures that live in your eyebrows. You do have creatures that live in your eyelashes. You do have creatures that live on your skin, called bacteria. You're totally covered. You do have creatures that live in your oral cavity. You do have yeast. You do have bacteria. You do have lots and lots of bacteria that live in your intestines. So, if you include all of us and everything that's in this room that's alive, we have a huge population, community right here. Okay, and then we go into an ecosystem, and in this case, on our ecosystem, we actually have 3 different ecosystems that join right here in Odessa, Texas. The Trans-Pecos begins in Odessa, Texas, and heads south from here And then, of course, down into, actually all the way into Mexico. We call it the Chihuahuan Desert is what we commonly call it. And so the Chihuahuan Desert begins here. Now, if you move over into Arizona, you're in the Sonoran Desert. If you're in California, you're in the Mojave Desert. But yeah, the Chihuahuan Desert begins here. So that's just one ecosystem. And then we have the Edwards Plateau, which then goes up into, say, Austin area. I mean, that whole Edwards Plateau meets right here at Odessa, Texas. And then you have the High Plains, and the High Plains is over there in Lubbock. And so, you know, that all meets here as well. So we're at the juncture of three ecosystems. For a biologist, that's a very unique place to be. Most people just look out and go, well, it's just pretty darned ugly. You know, to a biologist, if you look around as to what life you have in animal life, you're like, yeah, this is a pretty cool place. But, you know, depends on what you think is cool, obviously. People think different things are, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. We're not all the same. It's a big world. We can all live here. And then the whole biosphere would be of course, the entire planet is the biosphere. Okay, now let's move on. So emergent properties. These are properties that emerge out of the hierarchy of the components. And that could be of, say, the organism. You know, if you take a pancreas out, if you dissected a human being and just took out the heart and the pancreas and the spleen and so forth, you know, each one has a different function. But when you put all those together into the human being, the properties that emerge are so much greater than the sum of each individual parts. Each individual part. You know, I give what does a pancreas do? What does a spleen do? What's a gallbladder do? What's a, you know. But if you add all that together, what the human being can do, pretty much off the chart. I mean, people do amazing things. And so we have properties that emerge out of all of those components. And those are called emergent properties. And that's very significant, very, very significant. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That's the best way to describe that, the whole. It's greater than sum of its parts. And those are emergent properties. Okay. All right. Here's some, the cell, structure, functional unit. Cells are at the level at which properties of life emerge, which means the cell is the simplest unit of life. The simplest. You can't have anything more simple and it be called a living unit. The cell is the smallest, the simplest of all living units. So, again, properties of the cell. We've already looked at some of these. Regulation. We talked about that. We didn't talk about. We did talk about thermoregulation, but you know, we can have all kinds of regulation. You know, how much our blood sugar level. Give as an example, you know, as another regulation, which obviously we have to keep in check. Energy consumption, amount of energy coming in, amount of energy going out. You know, if you're taking more energy, if you're taking more food energy in than you're expending, obviously you're going to gain weight. If you're expending more energy than you're consuming, obviously you're going to lose weight. Not that complicated. It's just people, there are hormones that have an impact on that. So some people have a difficult time with it. But, you know, that's a hormonal thing. They don't really have a whole lot of control over that. It is hormonal, you know. So some people are larger, some people are thinner. You know, I am cool with all of it. You know, the only time that weight tends to bother me a little bit, if somebody is obese, so overweight, it's going to threaten their life. It's called morbidly obese. I have a problem with that because, you know, that is very damaging, very, very damaging. So yeah, I do have a problem with that, and it's just like, I wished I could help there, but that's gonna take more than just some verbal help, which is about all I could give. Anyway, respond to the environment, complex organization, and of course reproduction. We've talked about that. Give rise to new cells, one cell giving rise to two cells. Can be asexual, can be sexual. Maybe there are gametes produced that join, and that produces a new organism. Sperm egg, as an example. That there are many different types of gametes out there, but that's certainly what we're most familiar with, would be that. So, and again, we've talked about most of those already. So they're all enclosed in a membrane, all cells, and of course the genetic information is the DNA. Okay, so we're going to have to close that because we're out of time, and let's meet in lab at let's say 10 after. That'll give you 15 minutes for a break, and lab is in 303. Now, I will tell you, if you did not listen to the pre-lab, you really will not be able to do that lab at all. So if you didn't listen to it, you're probably going to want to go home and listen to it and work on that assignment because it's just what you have to do. And you'll have to do that before every lab. But I want to be able to help people who are having problems, and we do want to work through that and try to understand where the problems are, if there are any problems. Okay, we'll see you in a minute.